Okay, I know each one of you has been there. You're at a special concert, a great performance, where these performers, whether it be soloists, an ensemble, a group, has just got done playing this amazing piece of music. And we're all cheering, we're all applauding. We thought it was just an amazing performance. And at that certain time, something special happens, a surprise, something that's not in the program, something unexpected. In fact, the group, the performer, the soloist plays a song just for you. Now that piece is called an encore, and it has the special power to transform an already great performance into something truly unforgettable. Hi, my name's Jeff Price, and I want to welcome each of you to Intentional Musicianship, where we explore how to craft performances that captivate, connect, and inspire. Now, today's episode, we're diving into the art of the encore. It was inspired by a social media post I saw by Amiko Edwards, an amazing classical pianist. And she said this was her favorite part of the program. You see, when I think of an encore, it's more than just a bonus piece of music. An encore is a gift. It's a way to say thank you to our audience, and it's a way to give them a special moment, a lasting memory. So whether you're a soloist, part of an ensemble, or leading a band, or a choir, or an orchestra, this episode is designed to sort of help guide you through using this encore to create impactful moments that turn those casual listeners and folks that, were a little bit reticent to come to the show into devoted fans. Now, I've divided this podcast into a few sections, and so I thought we'd go over 5 total sections. And so the first thing, we just want to really talk about what makes that encore special and talk about it in its context of the emotional arc of the program. So an encore can be used in many ways. It can bookend a particular piece of music internally in your program. It sort of is that final way to connect the words in that sentence and conclude that thought for that part of the story. It's used to complete that moment, evoke some emotion, and allow that audience to be a part of something really special and unforgettable. But we can also use that moment at the end of the show to drive home that relationship and our thanks as performers, to let the audience know that they're special and we appreciated them coming to our show. And so when we go about this encore, we sort of have to think of that emotional arc and figure out how we're going to use this within the program. Amiko had said in her post, and she's a specialist in American music and presenting some amazing concerts. Her videos on YouTube and her social media posts are just amazing. And in this social media post, she was presenting an encore for an American music program that she was getting ready for. It was Blues No. 1 by Aaron Copland. And I loved how that would fit within her programming, within her genre, because it made so much sense, because the character and how it basically had that harmonic vocabulary and significance that just made it, that's Aaron Copland. This is refreshing. This is a breath of fresh air. This is going to allow the audience to refocus, take something in, just breathe a little bit and be ready for the next bit of the concert. Something specially designed just for them. And I know I've never forget attending a United States Navy Band concert. It was just 2.5 blocks down the street. I lived on Cedar Street in Morgantown, West Virginia. And the high school auditorium was just down the hill. And so you just walk down the hill, and that was the doors for the auditorium. And I remember at this particular concert, they're amazing playing. Of course, they're all in uniform. They're playing so well. They're representing the United States Navy, and I'd never seen anything like it. But at the end of their show, they played a simple patriotic encore. it wasn't the complexity of the music that struck me. It was the connection to the rest of the show and the moments that they created that left that lasting impression. And in this case, they had herald trumpets as well. So they had a visual part where everyone stood up with these herald trumpets and performed. And not only were they just excellent, but just that sonic visual that overcame us in the audience was just one of those moments that it's hard to put words to because I still remember it to this day. So when we think about our encores, we think of some mistakes that we want to avoid, whether it's playing too many of them, maybe misreading the audience and maybe letting a moment get away where we probably should have played our encore without all the dead time, which means we probably have to avoid clunky transitions and really plan things out. And we have to sort of make sure that whatever we play actually fits within the character and the mood, the expectations of the audience. And so when I look at that, when we think of something like a poor selection, there's a lot of things that we can do with an encore, and about everything can work. But within our personality, our genre, our groups, there are some norms. Sometimes we just have a bag of tricks that we know is going to work well with our group. Maybe we're a popular ensemble and we have some special songs that we're saving to the end that people might have come to hear. Maybe like a John Philip Sousa celebration, if we're playing like that band from the end of the 19th century into the beginning of the 20th century, there might be a more complicated operatic instrumental overture or a vocal solo, and then maybe the group then finishes that thought, that sentence with a march. And when we think of those kind of things, we want to make sure that we practice out and we don't have clunky transitions. We need to rehearse them so it's seamless. We want to make sure we take that applause and we control the moment, which leads to misreading the audience, because the clunky transitions and misreading the audience, we have to figure out how to control the moment. And so when I think of taking in applause, and this isn't just for encores, I see musicians all the time miss this step. They don't control the moment. You have to use gestures and you have to use an awareness of where you are on the stage to allow people to give thanks. And so we want to use gestures that bring people in. So I think about putting your hands to the left and the right with your palms open, allowing the audience to clap, and your hands are up like you're taking this in. Sometimes from there, you might bring one hand or both hands into your heart and you might tap on your heart to say thank you. You might nod, and you're taking it in and allowing that moment to breathe and be special. Because if you just stand there, bow, and then move to the next piece, maybe the audience hasn't had enough time to give their gratitude. It might be clunky that you might walk off stage and they stop applauding, but you were expecting them to invite you back on so that you could play an encore. And so it's best to think these things out and learn how to control this moment. And so when I think about the audience applause, it's pretty easy if you don't move from stage. Like I said, you could just sort of control that with your hand gestures and nodding. And sometimes you might give a one more sign. But if you walk off stage and there's an expectation that you walk off stage, maybe there's someone on stage, like a director of some kind, also giving you applause as the soloist, letting the audience know that the applause isn't over yet. There's something more to happen. But if you go off stage, sometimes you have to just come on quick again. And maybe you just stand on the corner of stage right. You don't have to come all the way to the center. But you can take in that moment and make it feel comfortable and not clunky. And I think that's a really great way to allow your encores to be special because you've timed and thought them out. Now, sometimes at the end of that particular applause timing, you can go right to the microphone or at that last second before they're done to say, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your applause. I have a very special piece I'd like to play for you that I've prepared just for you. And then you can announce it, talk about it, go right to where you're going to perform and execute. Now, back in the military, I've seen this a lot. We could sometimes misread the audience. We would plan at least 3 encores. In fact, over my time, I remember playing, maybe 6, 7, 8 different kinds of encores in these spots, and we'd rotate them around over different concert tours. We'd place them on different programs because, if you're on the road for 45 days or so and you're playing in all sorts of regions of the United States, there might be a different response depending on the audience. And sometimes you'd play encore number 1, or sometimes you go 1 to 2 to 3. Sometimes the audience was insatiable. Sometimes the audience, because of the program, they had had enough. There were already some internal encores to feature an instrumental soloist, a vocal soloist, and then a big choral package. Their emotions were spent. And so sometimes, depending on what's happened, we might try to force this extra encore or these extra encores on people. And it's almost like they're in the ocean and then the waves just keep hitting them. And sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes you can be in the right spot at the beach where the waves are just really great and you're just enjoying yourself in the surf. But sometimes you're at the wrong spot at the wrong time. And you got to make sure that you're reading the audience well. So a lot of this stuff comes over time and practice. And you just have to experiment a little bit. Sometimes you just got to keep it simple, smarty. And maybe that means we accept applause and we take those bows and we go quickly and swiftly into our encores to avoid some clunkiness and make sure that whatever we've designed for our audience, maybe it has a chance to go off. So when you're thinking about planning your encore, we have a few steps. Of course, we got to know our audience. We got to align it with our program, with our storyboard. We might have to plan for some flexibility because we know our audiences and the different scenarios of what might happen. We always got to rehearse those transitions like we were talking about to not be clunky and not have those dead space pauses. And we want to make sure that those encores are short and impactful. And so when I think of knowing our audience, you know who you are, why you're performing, where you're going to perform. We maybe talk to the sponsor. We got a feel for what kind of audience they expect, what they are wanting, why they're coming. And that helps us sort of help in that design phase. And so these encores seem spur of the moment as a gift, but they're really thought out and planned. We know someone's birthday is coming, so to speak. And with the United States Military Band, we would play national Americana, things that people learned as kids, folk music. Might be a virtuosic showcase that you're trying to highlight this soloist, or maybe you're going to change the mood, or be something with great character and be playful. You're, in the end, going to tailor your choice to the mood and the setting of the audience. One of the best examples of a regional crowd pleaser that we might have in the state of Kansas in the United States, we have Home on the Range, something we learned as a folk song as a kid. One of the state songs goes over really well. It's also something that if you can do it, people can sing along. And I know here in West Virginia, one of the best karaoke songs all over the world is John Denver's Country Roads. And that resonates deeply. And so regardless of whatever kind of group you're in, if you have a version of Country Roads, or if you were in Kansas and you had a version of Home on the Range, if you were in Texas in the United States and you had the Yellow Rose of Texas, those are things that can engage your crowd and be something that's a crowd pleaser, bring them in and really have a lot of fun. And we have to think about those sentences and the story and the closure we might want to have and what kind of contrast. And if it's a palate cleanser, allow people to breathe. We had talked about Amico Edwards and using that blues number 1 as just a way after a heavy piece. We have something that allows people to take in and just cleanse their palate to keep the momentum of the show going. But depending on what's happening and what you play, you might have something lighthearted like a Flight of the Bumblebee, or maybe you make it fun and play the Bumblebee Boogie, which is basically the Flight of the Bumblebee with stride piano in the middle of it. Or we have a folk song like Somewhere Over the Rainbow, something that can be really refreshing to your audience. Now, when I think about planning for flexibility, I talked about how we had many encores suited for a number of scenarios because you're going to be playing these things and playing concerts for a long time. And if you're a high school group or a college band or an orchestra, there are things that can become part of your repertoire and expectations to help build your audience. And sometimes, though, depending on the venue and the audience, you already know from what you planned, first couple songs, you know that in this performance, that particular encore is not going to work. So you give it a hook. It's not written in the program. It's not an expectation. Now, we did plan it, but we've adjusted on the fly because we're experienced performers, and we'll just table that for right now. And there's lots of ways that you can get that to other members of your ensemble in case that's happening. You probably all have that feeling. If one gets the feeling, we all sort of end up getting it. But again, rehearse those transitions, avoid that dead space, those awkward pauses. I really do like to act the part, so to speak, and practice how I'm going to acknowledge that applause and how I'm going to move into the encore. It's part of the technical rehearsal that you might have before you do a show. It's something you can do without exerting a lot of your chops as you perform. And so I really am a big advocate. Now, make sure these encores short and impactful, 2 to 5 minutes. It's all you really need. You want to make this a highlight, a moment, a memory. You don't want to make this an afterthought or something that's burdensome on your audience. And we've already talked about, just the way that we have so many different encores and moods that we can fit, whether it be virtuosic, reflective, playful, patriotic, regional in nature. Just saw the Pittsburgh Symphony, and another playful song that really worked everywhere in the United States, but particularly in the South, is the Orange Blossom Special. It's a bluegrass medley, usually played by a fiddle player. And so in this case, the violin player played a wonderful solo as a guest artist with the Pittsburgh Symphony. At the end of this wonderful concerto, they walked off the stage. The director kept applauding. There was a standing ovation. Everybody was engaged. The person came on 1 or 2 times. The audience was controlled by the director, plus, it was a fever pitch in there. And the second time they came out, the violin player went to the microphone and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, just for you, I've arranged a special version of the Orange Blossom Special for each of you." And by himself, he played a very more classical version of the Orange Blossom Special with some special techniques and ways to show off. And of course, this was right before intermission. And so again, at the end of this, we had stood for the solo, but now we stood for the encore. People were heightened in emotion. It left a great moment. And so finally, we just want to make sure that that encore is that opportunity that we have to connect. And it says to our audience, "You're special. I planned something just for you." And when it's done well, an encore encourages future attendance, social media follows, and a positive buzz. It strengthens your bond with your audience and helps turn them into lifelong fans. And fan is short for fanatic. They'll do anything for you. And that's the beauty of the encore. It's a special gift to your audience, a way to leave them with a moment that they'll carry forever. Whether it's a virtuosic showcase, a heartfelt ballad, or a playful surprise, a well-crafted encore can really elevate our performances and make them unforgettable. Now, I'd like to hear about your own encore experiences as a player, as an audience member. What's worked for you? What are some memorable encores you've seen? What are some missteps that have happened? You can share your thoughts with us at intentionalmusicianship.com. You can see us, all the email addresses, and us on social media. You can always schedule a consult call where we can just sort of talk and build community. It's a joy to meet each and every one of you that are listening. And as always, I just want to really, truly thank you for listening in. And I want to encourage you to keep creating those unforgettable special moments with your audiences as you're on center stage. And I look forward to next time we're together on Intentional Musicianship.